Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, shalom, everybody. Let me begin by saying it's a privilege, joy, and honor that Yeshua the Messiah has given me to be able to spend this evening with you and to share with you the message which He's placed upon my heart for this time, for this season, for this community. And so this is my first time being in Ava, Missouri. And I had heard that there were Torah believers in the area, but the reality of what's going on here and the extent of what's going on here really didn't hit me yesterday till I spent some time with David and even today and travel around and see the influence that the Torah believers have here. And then being told that it's been happening for 20 years that Torah believers are being drawn to the Ozarks, being drawn into this area. And so, that being the case, why and how is the draw to the Ozarks in this area? What purpose does God have? Well, many people believe that the Ozarks in the days of trouble, particularly in America, is going to be a place of refuge. And I believe there's been many prophecies that's gone forth regarding that. And then, given that so many Torah believers have been drawn to this area, is it possible that He's brought the community that He has brought together so far and will continue to do, that He's bringing you together in preparation for the return of the Messiah, in preparation for what I call the greater Exodus? And is it possible that He's having people rehearse being a community, getting along with each other in the context of preparing for the greater Exodus? And so I believe in that context, what God wants me to do, what Yeshua wants me to do, is to share with you greater details about the greater Exodus, because you may have heard about it, but there's only a few people that really teaches anything in particular detail regarding it. So it's one thing to know of it, it's another thing to have an understanding of the details that are associated with it. And so the first thing you need to understand that you've never heard in church, and that is it's the role and task of the Messiah to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. And at the time of Yeshua's first coming, there was a problem that needed to be solved before He could gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. Because the northern kingdom, because they participated and engaged in mixed worship of the God of Israel, that because of this mixed worship, they were taken into exile. They were taken into captivity by the Assyrians. And in Hosea, in chapter 1, it outlines the judgment of the northern kingdom for doing this. And it was expressed through the marriage between Gomer and Hosea and the names of their 3 children that are mentioned in Hosea in chapter 1. So in Hosea chapter 1 verse 4, the first child was named Jezreel. And Jezreel in Hebrew means El will sow or El will scatter. And so it's a proclamation of judgment of going into exile and being scattered into the nations. And so the second child in Hosea chapter 1 verse 6 was named Lo or Ruhama. Lo in Hebrew is no or not. Ruhama is mercy. So the second child was named No Mercy. And so the third child, as outlined in Hosea chapter 1, verse 9, is named Lo Ami. Lo is no or not. Am is the Hebrew word for people. Ami is my people. So the third child was named Not My People. And so the judgment is, I'm going to scatter you into the nations. I'm not going to show you any mercy, and you're not my people. How many of you know that that's not good news? But there's a pattern of the Almighty, particularly in the prophets, that when he declares bad news upon his people, he ends it with words of comfort, words of restoration, words of reconciliation. And so this is how Hosea chapter 1 ends. It ends this way, Hosea chapter 1, verse 10. Yet. Now, yet was in the context of, I'm going to scatter you in the nations. I'm not going to show you mercy, and you're not my people. Yet, despite of this, the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. What do you associate those words with? Promise that was made to Abraham, right? So somehow, the promise that was made to Abraham is going to be fulfilled through this judgment of the northern kingdom, where they're going to be scattered in the nations, and they're going to be regarded as not having mercy and not even being his people. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered, and it will come to pass in the place where it was said, you are not my people. Well, where is it said you are not my people? Right here in the prophecy. The third child is named Lo Ami, not my people. Now in the place where it was said you are not my people, it will be said that you are the sons of the living Elohim. So they're going to have a status change to not being his people to be a son of the living Elohim. In other words, it's a prophecy of restoration and reconciliation. So what do we see in John chapter 1 and verse 12? It says, as many as received him, that is Yeshua, to them gave he power to be called the sons of Elohim, even them that believe on his name. So what does it mean to become a son of the living Elohim? It means to be a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah. So they're going to go from being not his people to become believers in Yeshua as the Messiah. And so in their judgment, in them being scattered in the nations, in this declaration of no mercy and not my people, here's what it said about the northern kingdom. In Jeremiah, in chapter 3 and verse 8, and I saw when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I put her away and gave her a bill of divorce. In other words, what happened was the northern kingdom was cut off from the covenant. They weren't even in covenant relationship with the Almighty. And so when Yeshua came, he had to first restore the covenant relationship. And this is what he's trying to tell the Pharisees in John in chapter 9. Now, in John chapter 9, Yeshua heals a blind man on the Sabbath. Now, here's what we're told about Yeshua in Revelation in chapter 19 and verse 10. For the testimony of Yeshua is the spirit of prophecy. The testimony of Yeshua is the spirit of prophecy. And you know what is called the testimony? Let's see. How about Psalm chapter 'The Torah is called the testimony. So you might say the Torah of Yeshua is the spirit of prophecy. So all of Torah is wrapped in prophecy. Torah is fundamentally, in Yeshua, prophetic. You can't disconnect Torah from the spirit of prophecy. So what Yeshua is doing at his first coming is literal, but what he's literally doing, he's prophesying of. Because prophecy first comes about through a prophetic declaration or a prophetic act before it gets manifested in the physical. So he's literally healing a blind man, and it's literally happening on the Sabbath, but it's a prophecy. Who's the blind man prophetically? The blind man prophetically is Jacob. So we go to Isaiah in chapter 42 and verse 18. Hear you deaf and look you blind, that you may see. Who is blind but my servant, or deaf as my messenger that I send? Verse 24. Who gave Jacob for a spoil and Israel to the robbers? Did not Yahweh, he against whom we have sinned? For they would not walk in his ways, neither were they obedient unto his Torah. So who's blind? Jacob. Why is Jacob blind? Because he wouldn't follow the Torah. So the blind man is Jacob. The blind man is Israel. And Yeshua heals the blind man on the Sabbath. Well, that's a prophecy that Yeshua is going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel in the eschatological Sabbath. It is, and could be regarded as the prophetic Sabbath of creation. Because, right, what happened on the seventh day of creation? The Creator rested. Okay? And Psalm 90, verse 4, each day is 1,000 years. And so that seventh day of rest is prophetic of a 1,000-year period in the future. That's the eschatological, the 1,000-year period in the future. The eschatological Sabbath of creation, that creation itself was prophesying of 6 days and then rest. The creation was in 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. So the creation itself is going to labor for 6 days from what? From the sin of Adam. And it's going to rest for 1 day. That's 1,000 years. And that is when Yeshua is going to rule and reign on the earth for 1,000 years. So we commonly call that the Messianic era, but the prophets called that period of time the day of the Lord, the day of Yahweh. In, I think, 2 Thessalonians, it's called the day of Mashiach. Okay? Because the prophetic Sabbath of creation, the Messianic era, the day of Messiah, is the period when he's going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. That's when he's going to take the blindness away from Jacob. That's when Jacob is going to know that Yeshua is the Messiah, and they're going to know that they need to be following his Torah. That's when the Torah is going to go forth from Jerusalem, from Jerusalem. Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 3. So then, at the end of John chapter 9, the Pharisees ask Yeshua, John chapter 9 verse 40, are we blind? Now, Yeshua, his answer is basically much or most of John chapter 10. And he's made several points, but I'm not going to go through the details of the points of where he itemized that the Pharisees were blind. I'm just going to highlight the particular point of what I'm speaking with you about, and that is, it's the role and the task of the Messiah to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. So, in answering the question, are we blind, he says in John chapter 10, verses 16 and 17, to the Pharisees, other sheep I have not of this fold. So he's calling the Pharisees who don't believe he's the Messiah, he's calling them his sheepfold. And then he's also telling them that he has another sheepfold that's not them. And notice it says, other sheep I have. Now, you know what I have is? It's past, present. I have is not future. So he didn't say, I will have a sheepfold when I die, shed my blood, and then they end up believing on me. Before he dies, before he sheds his blood, he's stating that he has two sheepfolds. And one of them is of the Pharisees. Now, if you accept that the words are true, and I do, okay, the only way that his statement can be true is if Yeshua gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. Because the one that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai entered into covenant with the house of Jacob, who got split into northern kingdom and southern kingdom, two kingdoms or two sheepfolds. And one of those two sheepfolds is the house of Judah, or the Jewish people, of which he's talking to. He's talking to the Pharisees. So the house of Judah is a sheepfold. The northern kingdom is a sheepfold. And he's trying to tell the southern kingdom that he has another sheepfold. That would be the northern kingdom. And he says, them I must bring. Okay? Why did he say, I must bring them? Because Yeshua follows the Torah. Yeshua follows the Torah, and what is one of the many commandments of the Torah? You must redeem the firstborn. Well, who's he redeeming? The northern kingdom. Who's the leading tribe of the northern kingdom? Ephraim. And who's Ephraim? Ephraim and Manasseh, sons of Joseph, was given the blessing of the firstborn in Genesis chapter 48. And so what happened to the firstborn? The northern kingdom. They got cut off from the covenant. They're not even part of the covenant after they got scattered in the nations. And so who was left to redeem the firstborn? Well, there's nobody on earth to redeem the firstborn. The only way we can redeem the firstborn who's cut off from the covenant is if God the Father sends his firstborn. Yeshua is called the firstborn. And to redeem his firstborn on the earth, to fulfill the Torah. And so he's going to come, and Yeshua is going to explain to the Pharisees that in order to do this, he has to lay down his life. Therefore does my Father love me, because I laid down my life. So in order to redeem this other sheepfold, he's going to lay down his life, and then he says, there will be one fold and one shepherd. In other words, the two sheepfolds are going to become one, and there's going to be one shepherd over those two sheepfolds. Well, he just told the Pharisees in John chapter 10, verse 11, and John chapter 14, that he is the good shepherd. Yeshua said, I'm the good shepherd. And the two sheepfolds are going to become one. Now, ultimately, for that to happen, Yeshua said he has to lay down his life. So Yeshua is stating that he's laying down his life in one of the things that gets accomplished in laying down his life. One of the things that gets accomplished is it's for the purpose of gathering and uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, this is repeated in John chapter 11. All right? Now, what I'm sharing with you is a very important and very central message that you must understand. Because in the traditional church environment, they emphasize we need to preach the gospel. We need to preach the gospel. We need to reach the world for the gospel. What's primary and most important is preaching the gospel. But they got a definition for what the gospel is. And they've pretty much defined the gospel as explaining to people why Yeshua had to die, why he had to shed his blood, and why you need to accept him as the Messiah, and why he resurrected 3 days after he died on the tree. And explaining that, and explaining that you need to receive and accept him, they call that the gospel. So in other words, the gospel is sharing with people why Yeshua died on the tree. That's how they define and see the meaning of the word in the term. Well, if that's being the case, and Yeshua's telling the Pharisees that he's dying to take two sheepfolds and to make them one, he's dying for that purpose, well, wouldn't this be a part of what would be the gospel? That we need to tell the world why Yeshua is dying to take two sheepfolds and to make them one? But you know, I started going to church when I was 5 years of age. I'm now 58 and a half. And I've never heard one sermon ever in a Sunday church, one sermon ever on a Christian radio station, not one sermon ever on a Christian television station making the claim that Yeshua died to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. So you know what that means? if you realize that that is true, that he died to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel, it means we do not yet fully understand his first coming. And if we don't yet fully understand his first coming, what's the probability we're going to understand his second coming? All right, so now in John chapter 11, the setting of John chapter 11 is Yeshua resurrects Lazarus, okay? So there really was a person named Lazarus. And we're told in John 11:1 that a certain man was sick named Lazarus, and he was from Bethany, and that's the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Now, there really were two sisters named Mary and Martha. But if you look up the meaning of their names, Mary and Martha, it says basically Martha is the same as Mary. And Mary means to be rebellious. And so Lazarus is going to be a prophetic picture of Israel in exile. And Mary and Martha is going to be a prophetic picture of the two houses of Israel. Now, biblically, it's northern kingdom, southern kingdom. But to use modern terms that I more identify with, we more use the terms of those that believe in the God of Israel as being Jews and Christians. Okay? So here, Mary is going to be prophetic of Judaism. And Martha is going to be prophetic of those that believe in Yeshua as the Messiah. So I just use the term Christianity, okay? And so regarding Lazarus and his situation, because in John chapter 11, verse 14, Yeshua said plainly, Lazarus is dead. And so what happens then is Yeshua says, John chapter 11, verse 21, Martha, now put in their Christianity, okay, says to Yeshua, if you had been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatever you ask of the Father will give it to you. No, that's the belief of Christianity. You know, ask the Father through Yeshua, and we can have it done. And so Yeshua said unto her, your brother will rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Now, put on how Christians think, okay? He's going to rise again the last day. You know what they're thinking of? The rapture, the individual resurrection of the believer. That's how the Christians are going to view it, okay? Your brother will rise again. And Martha says, yeah, I know he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. And so Yeshua said to her, I'm the resurrection and the life. He that believes on me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes on me, though he shall die, and whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? All right, does Christianity believe that? Of course they do. So look how she responds. She said, yes, Master, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, which would come into the world. And so that's what Christianity believes about Yeshua. He's the Savior that died on the tree. And that when we repent of our sins, we can be a part of his eternal family. Now, what's going on here is Yeshua is telling a prophecy about the viewpoint, the thought process of Christianity, and the mindset of Christianity regarding Lazarus. And Lazarus means the servant of Yah. And who is the servant of Yah? It's Israel. It's Jacob. Or Lazarus actually means he whom El helps. And the one that El helps, you might say, also it's connected with being servant, is Israel. And so actually what Yeshua was trying to convey to Martha, or Christianity, that he's the Messiah and he's going to resurrect Lazarus in the last day. In other words, he's he's going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. And when he's going to do it, he's going to do it on the last day. When's that? That's the prophetic Sabbath of creation, otherwise called the Messianic era, otherwise called the day of Messiah. That's when he's going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. But now notice her reaction. She said unto him, well, after she said, I believe you're the son of Elohim, which would come in the world, when she had said this, she went her way and called Mary, her sister, secretly saying, the master has come and calls for you. Did Yeshua tell Martha to go fetch for Mary? No. But she tells Mary that the master calls for you. See, that's what Christianity does. Christianity doesn't take the time to listen that Messiah died and is a part of what he is ultimately going to accomplish in his death. It has a purpose, an end purpose for gathering and uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. They don't even take the time to listen to that. They just want to know that he's the Savior, and let's go get the Jews saved. So he's prophesying of the attitude and the mindset of Christianity. And so, meanwhile, it says about Mary, the Jews then were with her in the house, and they comforted her. You know what that word comfort is? It's a code word for the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. In Isaiah chapter 40, it says, comfort ye, my people, and it says he's going to gather the lambs. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 10 and 11. Okay, comfort is associated with the end of the exile. And so that's what Jews do today. They go to the Wailing Wall and they pray in front of the Wailing Wall, and they're believing that one day the Messiah is going to come and end the exile, and that's their comfort. All right, and so now we have ultimately the shortest verse in the Bible, John chapter 11, verse 35. Yeshua wept. So in context, what's he weeping about? The situation with Lazarus, which is prophetic of the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. And so now, look what he says to Martha. Now, I want to remind you the conversation that he had with Martha that I just read to you, where he says to Martha, I'm the resurrection and the life. And then she responds, yeah, I believe that you're the Messiah, the Son of God that would come in the world. Yeah, I believe that you're the Savior. And so she's confessing that she believes in him and who he is, that he is the Savior of the world. And now, in John chapter 11, verse 39, Yeshua is about to resurrect Lazarus, but Martha says, hey, Yeshua, he stinks now. He's been dead for 4 days. In other words, this is a lost cause. That's a prophecy of the attitude of Christianity about the exile. Oh, the exile, that was Old Testament. The exile, that was about the Jews. We're in the new covenant now. I mean, that doesn't really pertain to us. It doesn't pertain. So just like leave it go. Don't. We don't need to talk about it. No, it doesn't pertain to us. Now look what he says to her. John chapter 11, verse 40. Yeshua said to her, didn't I tell you that if you would believe? Didn't I tell you if you would believe? Wait a second. She just said, I believe that you're the Son of Elohim that would come into the world. She just declared that she believed. And now he's telling her, didn't I tell you if you believe? Now, what is the belief that Yeshua is talking about? That he's the Savior? No, he's not talking about that. He's talking about whether you would believe that I'm going to resurrect Lazarus, who's a picture of Israel, the 12 tribes in exile. Didn't I tell you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of Elohim? Now, if you do a study on the glory of Elohim, you're going to see that the glory of Elohim is associated with the resurrection of the dead. And one of the applications of the glory of Elohim associated with the resurrection of the dead is the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. For example, Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 1. 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 Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 1 In Ezekiel, in chapter 37, it's the chapter, at least verses 1 to 14 in this chapter, is about the valley of the vision of dry bones. And we're told in Ezekiel 37, verse 11, son of man, those bones are the whole house of Israel, all 12 tribes. And then it says, behold, they say, our bones are dried, our hope is lost, we're cut off from our parts. So in other words, as long as northern kingdom is separated from southern kingdom, our hope is lost. Do you know what the Israeli national anthem is? Hatikvah. You know what Hatikvah means? The hope. And what is the hope? The gathering, uniting, and bringing Elohim's people back to the land. That's the hope, the end of the exile. All right? So, but as long as we're separated and scattered, our hope is lost. Therefore, prophesy and says, thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves, and I'll bring you into the land of Israel. So now look, I'm going to open your graves and bring you up out of your graves and bring you in the land of Israel. If I'm going to open your graves, that's a resurrection of the dead. Now notice what this resurrection of the dead is associated with. The gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel, the end of the exile. And so Christianity doesn't connect the resurrection of the dead with the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. And Martha represents the prophetic mindset of Christianity. That's why I said, if you believe what? That I'm the Messiah that's going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. You will see my glory. And so in order to affirm that this really is the context of what's going on here prophetically with the resurrection of Lazarus, the chapter goes on to say and actually prophesies that when he says, now look at this, John chapter 11, verse 43, when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Now, he literally spoke loudly, but it's a prophecy. There's a hint. You know what the loud voice is a hint to? The blowing of the shofar. Because the shofar makes a loud blast, a loud sound. And Isaiah 27, verse 13, that the gathering of the exiles of Israel will come with the sound of a great shofar. And so, and he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about his napkin. Yeshua said, loose him and let him go. So what's he bound up with? Religious tradition, religious doctrines, and you have to be loosed from all those religious doctrines that caused him to be bound up. Now look at this. This is a prophecy. And many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things that Yeshua did believed on him. So when did the Jews believe on him? When he resurrected Lazarus, or when he gathered and united the 12 tribes of Israel? So this is a prophecy. You know when the Jews are going to believe that Yeshua is the Messiah? When he gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel. So in Romans, in the book of Romans, in chapter 11, in Romans chapter 11, verse 15, Paul says, if the casting away of them, that is the Jews not believing that Yeshua is the Messiah, brought forth the reconciliation of the world, in other words, it made it possible for the northern kingdom to come back into covenant relationship, and anyone in the nations is possible, it became possible for them to repent of their sins and to be a partaker of the renewed covenant and believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. If that brought about the reconciliation of the world, what will be the receiving of them? In other words, what will come about when the Jews accept Yeshua as the Messiah? And Paul answers the question, life from the dead. So what's the life from the dead that Paul was referring to? Ezekiel 37. The dry bones being brought up out of their graves and being brought to the land of Israel. Because it says in Ezekiel chapter 37, when that happens, in Ezekiel chapter 37, I'll read verse 12 again. Therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come out of your graves and bring you in the land of Israel. And you will know that I am Yahweh when I've opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves. You will know that I am Yahweh when I have done this. Okay, did you see what we read in John 11? Many Jews believed on him when he resurrected Lazarus. And you will know that I am Yahweh when I have done. Don't know that who's Yahweh. Don't know that Yeshua is Yahweh. Because do the Jews believe that Yeshua is Yahweh today? No. Now, let me tell you something, share with you something now that I read in the Jewish writings. And so this was in, I believe, the Midrash Rabbah. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 35 and verse 39. Unto you it was shown that you might know that Yahweh is Elohim, and that there is none beside me. And then verse 39. Know therefore this day and consider in your heart that Yahweh is Elohim in heaven above, upon the earth beneath, and there is none else beside me. Okay, so the rabbis say this is the purpose of the entire Torah. The entire Torah was given only that you would know that Yahweh is Elohim. And what's associated with that? And there is none else. The whole Torah is only so that you would have the revelation and the understanding that Yahweh is Elohim. So, you know what the rabbis say is the fulfillment of all of the Torah? Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 35 and 39. The fulfillment of all the Torah is Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 9. And Zechariah chapter 14, verse 9 in the Jewish prayer book is a part of the Elenu prayer, which is declaring the kingship of the Almighty. And so Zechariah 14 and verse 9, and Yahweh will be king over all the earth in that day, and there will be one Yahweh and his name one. That's the fulfillment of all the Torah. Well, what's the context of that? Well, it says in Zechariah 14, verse 4, his feet will stand that day upon the Mount of Olives. Well, whose feet's going to stand upon the Mount of Olives? It's Yeshua's, because in Acts 1, he left from Jerusalem, and the angel said he's going to come back in like manner. So this is a verse that tells us that when he returns, his feet's going to stand upon the Mount of Olives. But whose feet's going to stand upon the Mount of Olives? If you go to the previous verse, Zechariah 14, verse 3, then Yahweh will go forth and fight against the nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. And his feet, whose feet? Yahweh's. Yahweh's will stand upon the Mount of Olives. All of Torah is only for the purpose that you'll know that Yahweh is Elohim. And when is all the world going to know that Yahweh is Elohim? When Yeshua gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel. Because we have in John chapter 12, verse 28, it says, Father, glorify your name. Then there came a voice from heaven saying, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. Glorify your name. What's his name? Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Glorify it. Oh, I already did. Glorify it. Oh, I will. When was his name glorified? When Pharaoh and his army drowned in the Red Sea, when he redeemed his people out of Egypt, his name was glorified. So when will his name be glorified? When Yeshua gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel. So what is the Hebrew letter by which glory is brought to something? It's the Hey. Because when Avram, his name was changed to Abraham, Avraham, what was added to his name to make Avraham? The letter Hey. You had Sarai, And her name was changed to Sarah. What got added to her name? The letter Hey. So the letter Hey is the letter that brings glory to a name. In Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, how many Heys? Two. Why two? Because there's two glories to see the fullness of his name. So the first, Yod, and the Hey is the first coming. And you have the Vav. The Vav, it means and. It's a connector. And so you won't fully know, the world won't fully know, Jacob won't fully know, who is Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey, until we combine the first coming and Hey, the second coming. Because the second coming is associated with glorifying his name. Didn't I tell you if you would believe that you would see my name glorified? So John chapter 11, that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God. So to remember the story about Yeshua healed 10 lepers? And so that's Luke chapter 17. Luke chapter 17. I didn't know I was going to do all this. This is really the foundation that Yeshua just, his purpose and his functions to gather, unite the 12 tribes of Israel. And I already know at the rate that I'm going, I'll never get done with what I came here to share, because I haven't started it yet. I'm just giving you the background. Okay, so Luke chapter 17, verse 11, it says, Yeshua healed 10 lepers. And he passed through the midst of Samaria. Well, who is living in Samaria? The northern kingdom. So the 10 lepers represents the northern kingdom. The 10 lepers, the 10 tribes of Israel. And so he comes to them. As he entered into a certain village, they met 10 men that were lepers that stood afar off. Well, who's afar off? What's that referring to? That's referring to the northern kingdom. Because in Daniel in chapter 9 and verse 7, Daniel in chapter 9 and verse 7, it says, O Yahweh, righteousness belongs unto you, but unto us confusion of face as it is this day. To the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, that's southern kingdom, that's the Jews, and all Israel that are near and far off throughout all the countries where you scattered them. So who's near? The Jewish people. You still can identify somebody that's a Jew. But who's far off? It's the 10 tribes. And so in Luke chapter 17, in verse 12, the 10 men that were lepers stood afar off. They lifted up their voices and said, Yeshua, have mercy upon them. And so he said to them, go show yourself to the priests. What's he telling them to do? I mean, that's right. He's saying return to the Torah. He's prophetically speaking to them and saying, hey, go to the priests. In other words, follow the Torah. Okay. And as they went, they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back. If I take turn back into Hebrew, what is it? It's shuv. It means to repent or return. When repent or return fundamentally means what? Return to the Torah. And so it says, and it came to pass as he went, they were cleansed. And one of the 10, now one of the 10 is a tithe. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back and with a loud voice, what's the loud voice? The shofar. For the loud voice glorified God. So only a remnant is going to, that believes in Yeshua as Messiah, only a remnant is going to return to the Torah. And what is your purpose of returning to the Torah? You know, this movement's been going on so long, and the people that's now come out of the church and return to the Torah, it's because you had a fire within you. You had a drive. You had a zeal. Something was just stirring within you, and you didn't quite understand what it was. And you ultimately, it was explained to you that it was the Torah, but we've gotten so focused that we haven't thought through, and we've lost the perspective of why we were even brought to the Torah. The reason why we were brought to the Torah is to prepare for the coming of the Messiah who's coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. And so if you get lost in the forest of the Torah, and you get lost in studying this and that and this word and that word and everything else, and you miss the connection or miss the understanding that you didn't come to Torah for Torah's sake. You came to Torah to glorify the one that brought you to Torah, and to give glory to the one who's coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. And how does he receive glory? When he gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel. So back to John chapter 11. Remember, we have Lazarus, a picture of Israel in exile. You have Mary and Martha, two sisters. So Mary, Judaism; Martha, Christianity. And so he tells Martha, Christianity, who believes that he's the Savior, he's trying to get them to believe that he's coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. But Christians don't care. They're just concerned that they're saved. After that, I'm good. Leave me alone. Okay, they don't know. They don't know. So actually, this is ironic. I've told you enough now that maybe you can understand the statement that I'm going to make. That if I could phrase it this way, in the first century, the Jews, in the circumstances regarding them and what they believed and what they were expected, things came about and happened in the first century in such a way that they missed Yeshua, that he's the Messiah. And the non-Jewish world was prepared to believe that he is the Messiah. But interestingly enough, if you really understand the scriptures and what I'm trying to tell you here, at least, that at the second coming of the Messiah, you know who's set up to miss his coming? The ones who call themselves Christians, that believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. And you know who's set up to believe that Yeshua is the Messiah? The Jews. Why? Particularly the Orthodox Jews. Why? Because the Orthodox Jews say the Messiah is the one that gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel. And once we see that the one that is the Messiah does that, okay, we'll believe in him. And they're reminded of it every single day in their prayers. So now look, when Yeshua resurrects Lazarus with a loud voice, it's a prophecy that Messiah is going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. Many Jews believed on him. So then it goes on to say, in John chapter 11, verse 49, and one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, you know nothing at all, nor consider that it's expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yeshua would die for that nation. Caiaphas prophesied that Yeshua would die for that nation. Okay, what nation do you think that he's prophesying that Yeshua would die for? The Jewish people. Now let's read the next verse. This is John chapter 11, verse 52. And not for that nation only. So Caiaphas prophesied that he would die for that nation, and then the next verse says, and not for that nation only. So he's dying for that nation and not that nation only. So how many nations? All of them, but we can say here two. Two, and how are these two? How do we recognize who these two nations are? But he should gather together in one the children of Elohim scattered abroad. Okay, at the time that Yeshua is dying, who are two nations? Who are the children of Elohim who are also scattered abroad? It says that's why he's dying. He's dying to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. And so, given that it is the role and the task and the function of the Messiah to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel, we have the setting in Acts chapter 1. Yeshua has been resurrected, and they're seeing him in his resurrected body for 40 days. And it says in Acts chapter 1, verse 3, he showed himself alive after his passion by many infallible proofs, being seen of them 40 days. Now, we don't have a full detail of everything that he said and did in those 40 days. But here in Acts chapter 1, you know what we do have? One question that was asked of him. And the one question is Acts chapter 1, verse 6. When they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Master, will you at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? Will you restore again the kingdom to Israel? So you know what restore again means? You know what restore means? It means something was in its original state, and then it departed from its original state, but now it's going to be brought back to its original state. That's what restore means. So there had to be at one point in time a kingdom to Israel that got fallen that's going to be brought back. So what was that kingdom to Israel that was in its original state like it should have been? It was when King David ruled over all 12 tribes from Jerusalem, because King David is prophetic of King Messiah. But what happened after the days of David and then his son Solomon? The kingdom got split into northern kingdom and southern kingdom. And from that splitting, it's never been united again. So they're asking the Messiah. So, I mean, they believe he's the Messiah. He's in a resurrected body talking to them for 40 days. They know he's the Messiah. And so they said, okay, are you going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel now? Are you going to restore the kingdom of Israel? So you know what he does? He gives them an answer and leaves. Okay, it says, you will receive power after the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses. Now that he's answering a question. The question is, will you at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? He's answering that question. He said, you'll receive power after the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you'll be my witnesses. So in context, witnesses of what? Witnesses of restoring the kingdom to Israel. See, we are to be empowered by the Holy Spirit for the purpose of proclaiming the restoration of the kingdom to Israel, that Messiah is coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. And you're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, to the uttermost parts of the earth. You're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem. Where's that? That's where the Jews are. In Samaria, where's that? That's where the northern kingdom is. And then to the ends of the earth. That's everybody. Okay, so then what happens? When he had spoken these things, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And he said, you men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing? This same Yeshua, which is taken up into heaven, will come in like manner. All right, so in the Hebrew culture, going back to the days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and patriarchal society, what your father said, his last words on his deathbed, you were supposed to remember the last words for the rest of your life and never forget them. So, as recorded in Acts chapter 1, what's the last words of Yeshua? Is you're going to be empowered to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. And he leads from the Mount of Olives. Why? Because Zechariah 14 says he's got to come back to the Mount of Olives. So in the Hebraic mindset, culture, perspective, what is it that we're supposed to remember until the day that he sets his feet down on the Mount of Olives? That he's going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. We're not supposed to forget it until it happens. But the thing is, we have forgot it. And it's not even in the thought process of a traditional Christian. So why is the Almighty drawing so many people into the Ozarks area and even as a Torah community in this area? Because you are now in preparation to be a community, to learn how to live as a community, practicing for Messiah gathering you and taking you back to the land of Israel. And so that's ultimately what he is doing, and now the time has come to make the community aware and to give you detailed information regarding that. And so the leaders in the community can start to promote the ahadness, the oneness of the community, to love one another, to support one another, and to encourage one another, not only in following Torah, but Messiah is coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. So, look, Yeshua's asked, when are you going to do it? Right? In Acts chapter 1. So that's my background, because for some reason the Almighty knew that I needed to share the background, or else I don't know why else it happened. So now we got the necessary background that we need, so I can now begin the process of sharing with you, relating it to the days and the times in which we're living, matching these prophecies to the days and the times in which we're living in, and hopefully we can connect an application to what is he doing in the Ozarks. You know, I was born and raised in Northeast Ohio. I never even gave any thought that I would ever leave Northeast Ohio. But last winter of 2021, the Almighty put on my heart, sell your house in Ohio. Okay. If I sell my house in Ohio, what am I supposed to do now? Am I supposed to get another house in Ohio, or what am I supposed to do? Then he puts in my heart, you need to get a place in Missouri. And so I don't know anything about Missouri. And so initially, what was on my mind, my thought, was to get a place in the Branson area. And so that's where I initially looked. But through him leading and directing me, I ended up getting a place in St. Robert, which is 80 miles from here. And so I only found out today that the Ozarks have different plateaus. I didn't know this till today. And one of the plateaus is named the Salem Plateau. And when I looked up St. Robert just a couple hours ago, it says St. Robert is in the heart of the Ozarks, and it's the heart of the Salem Plateau. So he brought me to the heart of the heart. And then Salem is what the name was for Jerusalem back in Genesis chapter 14. Melchizedek, king of Salem. It was the old historical name for Jerusalem. And so now I'm here in Ava and staying the night last night and coming here, and I see this little sign, 2 miles till Mount Zion.
I'm not from here either. I flew in from Kansas.
All right, so somehow there's prophetically what he's doing here is associated with Yerushalayim, with Mount Zion. And the time has come for us to be aware of this and prepare ourselves for this goal. So when we didn't keep the Sabbath and the festivals, what did we learn about why we needed to keep the Sabbath and the festivals? They were rehearsals. They're rehearsals for Messiah's coming. Now we need to learn that coming to Torah and being a Torah community and preparing ourselves for him to gather and unite is also a rehearsal. We're preparing. And what's part of the message of the Elijah message in in Isaiah in chapter 40? Part of the Elijah message in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3, the voice of him that cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of Yahweh. All right, now we got the appropriate background that when I ask you this question, which is now going to be the beginning of the heart of what the Almighty put upon my heart to share with you tonight, you've now got the appropriate background that when I read this verse and I ask you what does it mean, you should be able to tell me what it means, but you probably would have given me a different answer before you came here tonight, okay? And so it's Matthew chapter 24, verse 3. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming? And I'm reading from the King James, so it says, what shall be the sign of your coming? And the King James says, the end of the world. Now, if I'm just reading this without no Torah background, the end of the world, what does it sound like? Oh, when's the world going to blow up and not going to exist anymore? All right, that's what it sounds like. All right, but guess what? The world's... what is the question that's being asked? Can you tell me what question that the disciples would want to know? And what really in the Torah Hebraic mindset, understanding what's being asked? In what context? Of course he's wanting you coming back. We got that part. A Baptist can tell you that, okay? When are you going to return and gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel? Because that end of the world, that end of the world really means the end of the age. And what age is it talking about? The age that Israel is in exile. When is the end of the time that Israel is in exile? What's the sign that the age of Israel being in exile, what's the sign that the age of exile is over and we're going to start the Messianic age? What's the sign? That's what they wanted to know. How are we going to know when it's going to happen? So, can I give you a sign that is associated with the sign? Because they ask him in Matthew chapter 24, verse 3, I'll read this a little bit more slower and emphasize it. When shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So how many signs did they ask him for? One. The sign is one. They asked him for one sign. How did he answer the question? No. He gave them many signs of the sign. So in a way, yes. Okay. So he in a way did give them many signs, but it was the many signs of only the sign. All right? And so when Matthew chapter 24 gets explained, we explain Matthew 24 losing the perspective and the context of what the question was. We forget to explain Matthew 24 in the context of the question. We get caught up on all the signs. And we get lost in all the signs, such that when we're done, we never explain the sign. What's the sign? Okay. Now, in Luke's version, Luke chapter 21, verse 7, Master, when shall these things be? What sign, or what's the sign when these things will come to pass? And now, Luke 21 is a little bit shorter than Matthew 24, but ultimately he comes to it and he says, in verse 28, and when these things begin to come to pass, look up, lift up your heads. Now get this. For your redemption draws nigh. So what are you supposed to look for? The redemption. When it happens, look up, your redemption. That's what you're supposed to look for. In his return, you're supposed to look for the redemption. All right, what's the redemption? If you ask a Baptist Christian, what's the redemption? Well, it's I'm saved and he's coming for me to, completely finish redeeming me. And now I'm saved and I've got to spend time with him. That's what they're going to think. Redemption. If I would ask an Orthodox Jew, and I would say, what's the redemption? Immediately they're going to say without hesitation, you know what the redemption is? The end of the exile, the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. They actually call Messiah coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel the Messianic redemption, but they drop the word Messianic often and they just say the redemption. Your redemption. So Messiah is actually given signs of when he's coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. So how often in a Christian church has Matthew 24 been explained to the people that Matthew 24 is all about Yeshua giving signs that he's coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel? Because they don't know the Torah. Because they don't know the prophets. They don't know how the first part of the book is connected to the second part of the book. Okay? So, look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. All right, so I mentioned that I'm going to give you a sign that is related and connected to the sign. So now I'm going to share you a sign, okay? So this sign, not the sign, is the Gog-Magog war, okay? So we go to Ezekiel chapter 39, and I don't need to read the chapter to you. You know, it's about Gog coming against the people of Israel. And then ultimately, the Yahweh Elohim intervenes and miraculously defeats Gog and Magog. Now, look what is stated with the defeat of Gog and Magog. Upon the defeat of Gog and Magog, now look what's stated. This is Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 25. Therefore, thus says Yahweh Elohim, now will I bring again the captivity of Jacob, and have mercy on the whole house of Israel, and I will be jealous for my holy name. So he says, now I will do it. When is the context? When is the timing of the declaration of the now? It's after the defeat of Gog and Magog. Okay? So when am I going to now know that Messiah is going to come together and unite the 12 tribes of Israel? When I see the defeat of Gog and Magog. And then it says in Ezekiel 39, verse 29, neither will I hide my face any more from them, for I have poured out my spirit upon the house of Israel, says Yahweh Elohim. So the way the Almighty is going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel is through the greatest outpouring of the Holy Spirit that the world has ever seen. So Torah is connected with what the Spirit of Elohim is doing, because the testimony of Yeshua is the spirit of prophecy. So now I am going to share with you what the sign is. When you see this, you know, the days of the exile are done. They're coming to a close. So if we look at Matthew chapter 24, verse 30. Matthew chapter 24, verse 30. And then shall appear the sign. And then will appear the sign. Okay? So now he's telling us what the sign is. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. You know what the sign is? He's coming in the clouds with great glory. That's the sign. All right? So, what normatively, what thought is going to come into your mind? What image is going to come into your mind when you read those words? He's coming in the clouds with power and great glory. You know what? Huh? You're going to think right up there. He's coming in those clouds up there, and woo, it's powerful. So ultimately, you're actually missing the sign in its fullness. Okay? So I want to now explain to you the meaning of these words. That the sign, he's coming in the clouds. So I'm going to explain to you what the clouds are. And then he's coming in great glory. So now I got to explain to you what what the meaning of great glory is. Okay? So let's explain the sign. So now we're going to go to Joel in chapter 2. Joel chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Blow the shofar in Zion. Okay? What is one of the many reasons for the blowing the shofar? To warn Yah's people about something that's coming that they need to be aware of. But notice where the shofar is blown at. It's in Zion. Zion is not all of Yah's people. It's only the bride of Yeshua. and that's another study. Okay? So blow the shofar in Zion, sound alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yahweh comes. It is near at hand. So what's the warning? A warning regarding. It's a warning that what? That the day of Yahweh is near. It's a warning that the day of Yahweh is coming. That's the warning. And now it's going to describe the day of Yahweh. Now, the day of Yahweh is also the day of Messiah. It's the day of Yeshua. Why is it his day? Because that's when he gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel. It's his day. He will be glorified in that day. Okay, it's his day. So the day of Yahweh, the day of Yeshua, the day of Messiah, and I'm making a reference to, I better read it here. I'm making a reference to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 1. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Yeshua HaMashiach, and by our gathering together unto him. Now, if you only had a dispensational teaching of the Bible in a traditional Sunday church, how would you interpret the gathering together unto him? Right, exactly. That's the rapture. But now with this background, understand, what is the gathering unto him? It's the gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. He's gathering the 12 tribes of Israel. And then regarding his coming, in him gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, verse 2, that you not be soon shaken in mind or troubled, neither by spirit nor by word, that the day of Messiah is at hand. So the day of Yahweh is at hand is one and the same as the day of Messiah is at hand. Okay? So, I keep your finger there if you're following along somehow, to Joel chapter 2, verse 2, because I want to read to you a description of the day of Yahweh, the day of Messiah. So before I read that, I want us to flip over, if you're following along, to Ezekiel chapter 34, and I'm going to tell you exactly when Messiah is coming. Okay? Exactly when he's coming. Ezekiel chapter 34. And the context in verses 1 through 10 is the shepherds of Israel are not doing their job. I'm going to tell you the essence of what those 10 verses are about. They're not teaching Yah's people the Torah, and they're not teaching them that Yeshua is Messiah. He's coming together and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, and so they're feeding themselves instead of feeding the flock. Okay, so it says in verse 11, thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, even I will both search my sheep and seek them out as a shepherd. Well, who searches the sheep and seeks them out as a shepherd? Yeshua. And who's it say here that's going to do that? Yahweh Elohim. As a shepherd seeks out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered, so will I seek out my sheep, and I will deliver them out of all the places where they've been scattered. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to deliver them out of all the places where they've been scattered in the cloudy and dark day. That's when he's going to do it. That's when he's coming. He's coming in the cloudy and dark day. But what's the cloudy and dark day? Let's go back to Joel chapter 2, verse 2, when it describes the day of Yahweh. Joel chapter 2, verse 2, that the day of Yahweh is a day of darkness and gloominess. It's a day of clouds and thick darkness. So that is the description of the day of Yahweh. It's a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Now, does that sound positive or negative? Sounds negative, doesn't it? But do you know that one part of what I just read to you is extremely, 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 extremely positive? It is probably the most positive words that you could hear. But if you read it with your logical mind, you're not going to come to that conclusion. You know what part of it is extremely positive? When it says that the day of Yahweh is a day of clouds and thick darkness. So just to show you another scripture reference, we're going to look at Zephaniah chapter 1. Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 14. The great day of Yahweh is near. It is near and hastens greatly, even the voice of the day of Yahweh. The mighty man will cry there bitterly. That day, the day of Yahweh, that day is a day of wrath. It's a day of trouble. It's a day of distress. It's a day of wasteness. It's a day of desolation. It's a day of darkness and gloominess. It's a day of clouds and thick darkness. So you see, Zephaniah 1:15 says the day of Yahweh is a day of clouds and thick darkness. Joel chapter 2, verse 2 says the day of Yahweh is a day of clouds and thick darkness. That part of it is extremely positive. And I want to show you more verses so you understand how that is extremely positive. So we go to the Torah. We go to Exodus in chapter 24. Exodus chapter 24, verses 15 to 17. It says, and Moses went up unto the mount, and a cloud covered the mount. Verse 16. And the glory of Yahweh abode upon Mount Sinai, and a cloud covered it 6 days. So on Mount Sinai is this cloud. And then it says in verse 17, and the sight of the glory of Yahweh was like a devouring fire. So Mount Sinai is a cloud and fire. And what's the cloud and the fire called? You know, the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. What's the cloud and the fire called? The glory of Yahweh. The cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is called the glory. What did he tell Martha? Didn't I tell you if you would believe you'd see the glory? What's the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night called in the Torah? The glory of Yahweh. Okay, now Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 22. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 22. These words Yahweh spoke unto all your assembly in the mount out of the midst of the fire. He spoke in the mount, Mount Sinai, out of the midst of the fire of the cloud and fire, and of thick darkness with a great voice. So the presence of the one on Mount Sinai that's giving the Torah, who's that? That's Yeshua. His presence is described as a cloud and a fire and thick darkness. A cloud and a fire and thick darkness. And so I'm going to read to you what lights the New Jerusalem. What lights the New Jerusalem? And this is Revelation chapter 21 and verse 23, describing the New Jerusalem. The city had no need of the sun, neither the moon to shine in it. For the glory of Elohim did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light. The Lamb is the glory of Elohim. And so the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is called the glory. And Yeshua is the glory. So the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is him. And the same one that led the children of Israel by the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, the same one is the one that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. It was Yeshua that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. So, from our Christian influence, from the influence of dispensational thinking in the church, we've been trained to think the one that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai was who? God the Father. And if you still think that God the Father is the one that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, you still haven't learned the Torah adequately enough. You haven't even learned one of the most important things of the Torah is who gave it. Now we go to Exodus chapter 3 and verse 2. Exodus chapter 3 verse 2. It says, I'm reading from the King James, And the angel of Yahweh appeared unto him, that is Moses, in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. So who's the one speaking to Moses out of the bush? The King James says angel. The Hebrew word is malak. It means a messenger. Now an angel is a messenger, but not all messengers are angels in the context of thinking of an angel as Gabriel or Michael. Okay? So Yeshua is the messenger of his Father. And it was the messenger of his Father that spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. And Moses asked the messenger that appeared to him in the burning bush, "What's your name?" And the messenger said, "My name, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is my name forever and my memorial unto all generations." So Yeshua wants to be remembered as he's the one that made the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now we're going to go to Acts chapter 7. Acts chapter 7, in verse 30. "And when 40 years were expired, there appeared unto him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai a messenger of Yahweh in a flame of fire in a bush." So it affirms Exodus 3:2, that the one that spoke to Moses was the messenger of Yahweh. Verse 35, "This Moses whom they refused, saying, Who made you a ruler and a judge? The same did Elohim send to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel which appeared to him in the bush." So it was the messenger of the Father that appeared to Moses in the bush. Now look, verse 38. "This is he that was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel which spoke to him in Mount Sinai, with our fathers who received the lively oracles," that's the Torah, "to give to us." Acts chapter 7 verse 38 does not say God the Father gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. It was the Malak that spoke to Moses at the burning bush that gave the Torah to Moses and the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. So, does anyone here, I'm not asking you to put up your hand, would you not say that the Torah mentions that ultimately the one that's speaking to Moses is Yahweh and Elohim? So, we make something very complicated that's very simple to understand. Okay, so in Exodus in chapter 3, in verse 2, once again, it's the messenger of Yahweh that appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. Now, this messenger, that Acts chapter 7, verse 38, is the one that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. In the conversation with the messenger, it says in Exodus chapter 3, verse 4, "And when Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, Elohim called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses." So now look, the messenger of Yahweh is called Yahweh and Elohim, because the messenger of Yahweh that appeared to him at the bush is now speaking to him and saying, "Moses, Moses." It's not complicated. It's right there in the Torah. Okay? So we've made something that should be simple very complicated. And so that it has to be Yeshua that gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel is directly related and connected that he's the one that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. And he entered into marriage with his people at Mount Sinai. They broke the marriage covenant, so he had to die to renew the covenant that he originally gave, and he had to renew the covenant, and he had to bring the northern kingdom back into covenant relationship. And then he's also going to fulfill the promise that he made to his fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that even though your people get scattered in the nations, he's going to gather them. So now let's look at Judges chapter 2, verse 1. Judges chapter 2, verse 1. It says, "And the angel of Yahweh came from Gilgal to Bochim and said." Now, this word angel is malach, it's messenger. The angel there is not Gabriel or Michael or somebody of what we think of as the angelic class. So the messenger of Yahweh came from Gilgal to Bohem and said, now we're going to be told what the messenger says, okay? Pay attention to what the messenger says. I made you to go up out of Egypt, and I brought you into the land which I swore to your fathers, and I said, I will never break my covenant with you. The messenger of Yahweh is making the claim that he's the one that brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. The messenger of Yahweh is making the claim that he's the one that swore unto your fathers, that made covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the messenger of Yahweh is making a claim that I will never break my covenant with you. You see? We learned the wrong paradigm by going to church. And we think that now we've come out of the church, we're following Torah now, but we've still got church thinking. And we think it was God the Father that was doing all this stuff. It was Yeshua that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. And so he dies because he wants his bride to repent of his sins and return back to him and return back in a marriage covenant relationship. But when she returns and repents, he says, I'm going to make it better than what it ever was for you, even in the very beginning. All right, so now we're back at Matthew chapter 24. And we're talking about the sign. Okay? And the sign is that he's going to come in the form of the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. That's the sign. Because, back to Exodus chapter 24, verses 15 through 17, there was a cloud and fire on Mount Sinai. And Deuteronomy 5:22 says there was thick darkness. And that is called the glory of the Lord. So the glory of the Lord is Yeshua, but the glory of the Lord is Yeshua in the form of the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So you got your Torah definition? Once you got your Torah definition, what does it say about the day of Yahweh? It's a day of clouds, plural. Not a day of a cloud, but a day of clouds. Why plural? Because his people are scattered all over the world. He's not going to bring them back through one cloud by day and pillar of fire by night. He's going to bring them back in multiple cloud by days and pillar of fire by nights. And each cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is going to be Yeshua doing it. So first, he's going to appear in clouds. That is the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So he's going to physically gather his people back to the land. And the gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel and ending the exile is likened in the Bible to a marriage. It's likened to a marriage. So now, when we have completed the marriage, now we're going to have a marriage supper when the marriage is over. Where's the marriage supper? Revelation chapter 19, 7 and 8. So where is the marriage supper? In the heavenlies. How are we going to get there? It's what we commonly call, what the church might call the rapture. We say the resurrection of the dead. So first, he's going to execute the marriage. He's going to gather his people back to the land. Then there's going to be a marriage supper. That's in the heavenlies. Revelation 19, those at the marriage supper, along with Yeshua, are returning. Now they're coming in the clouds that you think of the clouds in the sky. So first he comes in the clouds, the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, and then he comes in the clouds. And he sets his feet down the Mount of Olives. And what's after marriage and marriage supper? Marriage celebration. So initially, how long we got to celebrate the Messiah ends the exile and gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel? How long we got to celebrate that? 1,000 years. Now when the 1,000 years are up, are we going to end the celebration? No, we're going to celebrate for all eternity. This celebration never ends. The celebration never ends. And so now in Matthew chapter 24, you see that when he's talking about he's coming in the clouds, plural, not in glory. See, the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is called the glory, the one. One cloud by day and pillar of fire by night. But when he's coming back in great glory. That's more than one glory. That's an enlarged glory. So he's coming back in multiple cloud by days and pillar of fire by night. Okay, let me show you something that's a little bit more. Did my battery go or no?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to keep talking, and you're going to bring me a new battery. So let me show you a scripture that is a little bit more explicit. Let me show you a scripture that's a little bit more explicit. It's Isaiah chapter 4, verse 5. Isaiah in chapter 4 and verse 5. So hello? Okay, good. So we needed to have more power, great glory. You see how God demonstrates in the natural what He's trying to get you to see in the spirit? See, it's wonderful. Isaiah chapter 4, verse 5. Yahweh will create, that's future, upon every dwelling place. How many? It's more than one. Upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion. In that verse, every dwelling place is called Mount Zion. In that verse. On every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies. How many? More than one. On every dwelling place of Mount Zion upon her assemblies. A cloud and a smoke by day and the shining of a flaming fire by night. So the cloud and smoke by day and the shining of a flaming fire by night is on every assembly. And the collective name of every assembly where we have the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, the collective name is Mount Zion. So a cloud by day and a shining flaming fire by night, for upon all the glory, you see that? The cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is called the glory. For upon all the glory shall be, the King James says a defense, but the Hebrew word, if you look it up, is huppah. What's a huppah? A wedding canopy. For upon all the glory will be a wedding canopy. So this cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night and leading the exiles back to the land is likened unto a wedding. A wedding canopy. Do you see that? So now we're going to go to Jeremiah chapter 33 and verse 11. Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 11. The voice of joy, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride. What's that? That's wedding talk. So what's linked with this wedding talk? At the end of Jeremiah 33, verse 11, I'm going to cause to return the captivity of the land as at the first, says Yahweh. The voice of joy, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, the voice of the bride. I'm going to cause to return the captivity of the land. You see, the gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is likened to a marriage. So now we have Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 10. For Yahweh has redeemed Jacob and ransomed him from the hand of him that was stronger than he. You know who the hand that was stronger than he? At this point in history that's describing? Esau. Yahweh has redeemed Jacob. What's redeeming Jacob? Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 10. Hear the word of Yahweh, O you nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. So the one that scattered Israel is the same one that's going to gather Israel. And when he gathers Israel, he's going to do it as a shepherd. He that scattered. Well, who's the one that scattered? The one that scattered is the one that gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. They broke the covenant, so he scattered. So the one that's scattered is going to be the one that gathers. And when he gathers, he's going to do so as a shepherd. Yeshua is a good shepherd, so he not only gathers, but he also scattered. As a shepherd does his flock. Then it says in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 13, then will the virgin rejoice in the dance. So you notice that the gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is likened to a virgin rejoicing in the dance. So now look, now Yeshua is asked in Matthew 24, verse 3, what's the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? I just told you what the sign is. The sign is the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. That sign means he's gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, and he's ending the age. And so this then is the sign of his coming. Look up, for your redemption draws nigh, the end of the exile. And so what does his answer include? His answer continues into Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 to 10. It continues into Matthew chapter 25. And verses 1 to 10. What's that? That's the parable of the 10 virgins. So why is he telling this parable in the context of what's the sign of your coming, the end of the age? Because the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel is likened to a marriage. And then the virgins are going to rejoice in the dance. And I was going to tell a parable about the virgins. Okay, so in this parable about the virgins, it says there are 10 virgins. So why 10 virgins? Well, 10 in the Torah, Hebraic culture, 10 is a minyan. And a minyan means a legal congregation. So if we only had 3 people here, that's not called a congregation. In Orthodox Judaism, you need 10 men. If we're liberal, we'll say 10 people. And if you have that, then you have a congregational meeting. So 10 virgins means those of Messiah's congregation. 10 virgins means the body of Messiah. Now, without this understanding, you know how the 10 virgins have been explained? The foolish virgins are the unbeliever and the wise virgins are the believers. When has unbelievers in the Bible ever been called virgins? Unbelievers. They're called whores. You know, when you get forgiven of your sin, then when you're called a virgin. Okay, so now, of the 10, 5 wise, 5 foolish. Why 5? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Why wise? Proverbs chapter 28, verse 9. Proverbs chapter 28, verse 9. Let's read verse 7. Proverbs 28, verse 7. Whoever keeps the Torah is a wise son. 5 were wise. What does it mean? Of the body of Messiah, we have those that were following the Torah. 5 wise. Now we have the 5 foolish. We have those that are not following the Torah. So who was ready for the marriage? What's the marriage? The gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. So who was ready for the marriage? Those that were following the Torah. Who was not ready for the marriage? For Messiah to gather, unite the 12 tribes of Israel? Those who are not following the Torah. So would you be able to comprehend and understand today that those who are in traditional Christianity, that they're unprepared for Messiah to come together and unite the 12 tribes of Israel? And at least the Torah community has a chance to be ready? Because at least in the Torah community, many have heard this message that about 2 houses and Messiah's coming together and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. So next what I want to do is we looked at the bookends of what the question was, what the sign is. He said that there were signs of the sign. And we saw that the sign is he's coming, gather, and unite the 12 tribes of Israel by the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And we saw that Yeshua called that the redemption. The redemption is the end of the exile. And now we want to look at some details now, the body of his answer. Now, remember, this body that we're going to begin to go over is actually signs that precede the sign. All right? Signs that precede the sign. All right, so what became a biblical reality to me, I don't know, it was in January or February, just a few months ago, was what I'm about to share with you now. And that is, there's a parallel between Matthew chapter 24 and Revelation chapter 6. And I want to show you that parallel because it relates to this whole thing that Messiah is coming together to unite the 12 tribes of Israel. So now, in Revelation and chapter 6, what we have is Revelation chapter 6. First, we have what's called the four horses of the apocalypse. They're actually the first four seals. Then we have the fifth seal, then we have the sixth seal. Okay? So there's 6 seals mentioned in Revelation chapter 6. Now, in the first seal of Revelation chapter 6, it's Revelation chapter 6, verse 2. And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Okay, that's one verse. That's the white horse. That's the description of the white horse. So this is going to parallel that when Yeshua was asked, what's the sign of your coming and of the end of the age, what's the first thing, and how did he begin to answer the question? It's in Matthew chapter 24, verse 5. Many will come into my name saying, I am Messiah, and will deceive many. And then he says in verse 4, the previous verse, Yeshua answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you, because many will come in my name saying, I am Messiah, and shall deceive many. So the first thing he warns about is don't be deceived. Okay? So once we begin to line up the parallelism of Matthew 24 and Revelation 6, that don't be deceived is going to be the white horse. Okay? So now in Matthew chapter 24, verse 6, and you will hear wars and rumors of wars. What's the next thing we have in Revelation 6? The red horse. And what does the red horse do? It takes peace from the earth. It's war. So we have the red horse. And then we have the black horse, which is basically economic collapse. And then the pale horse, which is all the ramifications of war and economic collapse. All right? And so then Yeshua goes on to say in Matthew chapter 24, verse 7, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilences in diverse places. Famines, pestilences. Well, it sounds like the black horse and the pale horse. All right? So what's the fifth seal? Martyrdom of the believers. Okay, so what does Yeshua say next in Matthew chapter 24, verse 9? They will deliver you up to be afflicted, and they will kill you, and you'll be hated of all nations for my name's sake. So that's the fifth seal. And then the sixth seal, he's going to mention in Matthew 24, verse 29. And then the gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is verse 31. He will send his angels with a great sound of a shofar, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the earth to the other. That's the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. All right, so that's the big picture of the parallel of Matthew 24 to Revelation 6. Now, I want to get into some particular details, and particularly the white horse and then the sixth seal, because it relates to Matthew 24, 29 to 31. Okay? So now we're going to look at the white horse. And I'm going to share with you something for you to consider. I am not at this point going to say absolutely for sure with 100% confidence that what I'm about to present to you to consider is how this should be interpreted. I'll present the evidence, and you think for yourself whether it can be interpreted this way, okay? But before I show you what I'm about to show you, historically, in the last 30 years, the white horse has been interpreted to be the Antichrist, the false Messiah that comes into the scene. Okay? And So then, let's examine the verse, okay? We have a white horse, and a crown was given to him. Okay, so we got this now. I'm going to get the tab here. I think it's the first tab. If you could bring up the first tab in the browser, right over here. First tab right up the top left. No, yeah, top left. No, right there. Okay, so how we got this is, you see, what is the Latin word for crown? What is the Latin word for crown? The Latin word for crown is corona. So I could read, he had a crown, he had a corona. All right? And so he has a crown. So is it possible that the white horse is the coronavirus, and what I'm going to link with the coronavirus is the vaccine? Is it possible? That's what I'm going to ask and share with you some information. So now let's go to the second tab. No, let's go to the third tab. And so we have Revelation chapter 6, verse 2? Yeah. So it says he has a bow. Go up to bow. So it's the Strong's number in the Strong's Greek dictionary, 5115. And so the Greek word is toxin. Toxin. So it's from this Greek word toxin that we get the English word toxic, which means what? Poisonous. So you would never get, by reading the English, that bow is going to be associated with something poisonous. Okay? So it's toxin. Okay? Now let's go up to the second tab. And we got the Oxford, this is the 2018 Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year. And what was the word of the year? It was the word toxicon. Right here, right there, but toxicon. You see it down, 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 down. Oh, there, you got toxicon there, toxicon. So toxicon was the 2018 Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year. So let's go up. You made it too big now. Okay. The adjective toxic is defined as poisonous and first appeared in English in the mid-17th century from the medieval Latin toxicus, meaning poisoned or imbued with poison. But the word's deadly history doesn't start there. The medieval Latin term was in turn borrowed from the Latin toxicum, meaning poison, which has its origins in the Greek toxicon, pharmakon. And what is toxicon, pharmakon? It's lethal poison used by the ancient Greeks for smearing on the points of their arrows. And toxicon comes from the Greek word for bow or toxin. So the word toxin, bow, in the Greek is linked with toxicon, and the word is, we get the English toxin or poisonous, and the Greek word toxin comes from what the ancient Greeks did when they put at the end of their arrows something poisonous, so when the arrow is shot, it's going to hit you, and it's going to hit your skin and become poisonous. So what would be the modern application of that? A needle. A needle. And so what did Yeshua say? Let no one deceive you. So many conservative people are vehemently and have been vehemently against getting the shot. Okay? And so why is there such adamant opposition to getting this vaccine shot? Can I answer the question for you, and you tell me whether I'm right or wrong? It's because you believe the people that's telling you to get the shot is fundamentally lying and deceiving to you, and what they're trying to tell you is innocent and safe. It's really not. It's going to cause you harm. Am I correct or incorrect? Okay, so what are you fundamentally opposing? The belief that if you take it as they say that it's safe and effective, that they're lying to you, or in other words, if you would do it, that they're trying to deceive you. Correct? And what did Yeshua first say? Let no one deceive you. So now we have a crown, and so what does a crown represent? Somebody that has authority or trying to rule over you, right? So what have they tried to do with the mandate of you need to get vaccinated, because if you don't, you're going to lose your job. If you don't, you can't do this. If you don't, we're going to humiliate you. So they're trying to dictate your life. And what does it say? Going forth, conquering and to conquer. The Greek word conquering and to conquer is the same Greek word that got translated to the 7 churches as he who overcomes, to overcome. So they're trying to overcome you. They're trying to tell you exactly what to do and how you're to live your life without your choice, without your permission. Okay? So that's crown. And so the crown might be associated with the corona. It's called a coronavirus. Corona, crown, trying to take over your life. And you don't want to do it because you think that they're lying, they're deceiving you, and it's not safe and it's not effective. And then this word bow in Greek is associated with the ancient Greeks, a poisonous thing at the end of the arrow. So what would be the application of this as it related to a corona? It could be the needle that's used to give you a vaccine shot, because you think what's coming out of there, it's poisonous. And I don't need to spend the next 20 minutes to say, what things that they say is in the vaccine and whatnot. I'm sure you know much of it, and it's not good, right? All right, so now that is the Greek. Let's go back and look at the Hebrew. What would be the Hebrew for bow? We looked at the Greek, so let's go here. So we're going to take the verse, Genesis chapter 9, verse 12. Elohim said, "This is a token of the covenant which I've made between me and you for perpetual generations." Come down a couple more verses. "I do set my bow in the cloud." Okay? So now the word bow, is that the verse that we got? Yeah, right here. Next tab. No, let's go to the previous tab if we could. Go to the previous tab and click on that verse that says, "I'm going to set my bow." How come it says close? Can we click on close and see what happens? Click on Genesis 9:13. Yeah, right there. Now click on tools. Okay, now go down to the text and look for bow. So bow is the Strong's number 7198. It's the Hebrew word cassette. Cassette 7198. Now we click on 7198. And you can see, if you come down a little bit, that it's associated with 6983, okay? And I'll go up. See that right there? Down, right there. Root word, it's 6983. So if we click on 6983, that's basically the root of the word for bow in Hebrew. And let's go, it's kosher. Come down a little bit more. Stop. You see, it means to lay bait or lure, to lay a snare. What do you do when you lay a bait? You're trying to deceive what you're trying to catch. So the Hebrew word for bow, the root of it is associated with laying a trap or to deceive. And the Greek word means toxic or poisonous. They're laying a trap to deceive. It's toxic or poisonous. And the crown is corona. So, is it possible, if I look at the Greek and the Hebrew, is it possible that this white horse may be describing the coronavirus and the vaccine? And if this is the case, we have started the 4 horses of the apocalypse. We've started the white horse. And if we started the white horse, is it possible that with Russia invading Ukraine, because We don't yet know how long that's going to last or exactly how it's going to go and everything. Is it possible that Russia, red Russia, and we're fearful, and it's in the news that China is going to attack Taiwan. Is it possible that the red horse is Russia going to war with Ukraine and China going to war with Taiwan? Is it possible we started the red horse, but we're not in the fullness of the red horse by any means? And so there may be a period of time until we get to the fullness of the red horse. But you know what we see every day? You know it when you go to get some gas or you go to the supermarket. We have the highest inflation in 40 years. Now, since I'm 58 and a half, I remember 40 years ago when we had that inflation. Okay? And so there's a concern that this high inflation could derail the stock market, could derail the economy, not only the United States, perhaps the dollar, but the economy of the world. It could lead to a collapse of our economic system. And they're actually talking about it. They're calling it the Great Reset. So is it possible that we're seeing the winds of the black horse? But when we combine the red horse and the black horse, we got the ugliness of the pale horse. And you know, we've started the cancel culture. You know, if you say something that they don't want you to say, they come against you. Well, is that the seeds of persecution in the form of, God forbid, that some people have to give up their lives for standing for the faith, standing for against the being vaccinated? And we just got in the news the last couple of days. Now they're trying to tell us that there's a monkeypox out there. And we got okay, ready? 20 cases. And the government has just bought, I don't know, a great large number of vaccines. So if there's only 20 cases, what makes them think that they have to buy all these tons of vaccines for the monkey virus that there's only 20 people that have it? And or do they know that this is going to, do what the coronavirus did? And so now they already know it because they're the one that engineered it and making it happen. So now they're going to try to put you on another vaccine. So is this what Yeshua is talking about when he's talking about plagues? Okay? So that's going to bring us to the sixth seal. The sixth seal. So I'm going to examine more closely the sixth seal. This is Revelation chapter 6 and verse 12. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth, as hair, and the moon became as blood. And then it says in verse 14, the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island was moved out of their places. Now, what do you think is going to cause every mountain and island to be moved out of their places? Could be an earthquake. What else? Could be. What else? How about a nuclear bomb? All right. So I think the sixth seal is going to have nuclear exchange, and that's part of the reason why the sun's becoming black and the moon becoming as blood. So you see this phraseology that's associated with the sixth seal? Now, we're going to take that phraseology of what's happening to the sun being black and the moon becoming as blood. Now we're going to go to Joel in chapter 2. Joel in chapter 2, verse 10. Joel chapter 2, verse 10. The earth will quake before them. Well, you can either interpret quake as, they're petrified and feared, which probably is the case. But is it possible that quake also may refer to earthquake? The earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble. The earth and the sun shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. The sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. So now let's go to Isaiah chapter 13. Isaiah chapter 13. Isaiah chapter 13, verse 10. For the stars of heaven, the constellations shall not give their light. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not cause her light to shine. So, I believe that the sixth seal is connected with Joel chapter 2, verse 10, and Isaiah chapter 13, verse 10. So, what's happening in Isaiah 13? Well, the setting of Isaiah 13 is Isaiah 13, verse 6. How? For the day of Yahweh is at hand. What does Joel chapter 2, verse 1 say? Blow the trumpet in Zion, because the day of Yahweh is at hand. Isaiah 13, verse 6. For the day of Yahweh is at hand. So it's the same time frame. Remember when Yeshua said, Matthew 24, men's hearts will fail them for the fear of the things coming upon the earth? Isaiah 13, verse 8, they will be afraid. Pains and sorrows will take hold upon them. There will be pain as a woman that travails. They will be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. Verse 7, then shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart will melt. So when Yeshua said, men's heart will fail them for the fear of the things coming upon the earth, he's making a hint to Isaiah 13, verses 7 and 8. Now, I don't have time to develop this. I do have some DVDs, at least in the ministry catalog, that will go over this. But here's what I believe Isaiah 13 is. It is a nuclear attack against the United States. And this nuclear attack against the United States is a part of Gog Magog. Okay? Now, Joel chapter 2. Joel chapter 2, verse 15. The day of Yahweh is at hand, as destruction from the Almighty shall it come. All right? You see that? The day of Yahweh is at hand, as destruction from the Almighty shall it come. Let's go back to Isaiah chapter 13. Isaiah chapter 13 and verse 6. The day of Yahweh is at hand. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. You see the same words? So what's happening in Joel 1, Joel 2 is connected with Isaiah 13. Same words. So now, Joel chapter 2, it talks about Joel 2:1, for the day of Yahweh is at hand. And so now we have Joel chapter 2, verses 2 to 10. I'd like to submit to you that Joel chapter 2, verses 2 through 10 is the Gog-Magog attack upon Israel. But most people, most Bible prophecy people, won't teach that Joel chapter 2 is the Gog-Magog attack upon Israel, because the words Gog and Magog don't appear there, and most people, unless they see the words, they don't see it. But you know what it says in Joel chapter 2, verse 20? Joel chapter 2, verse 20. I will remove far from you the northern army. So he's not going to remove an army if an army hasn't come, and if he isn't talking about an army. So the Joel chapter 2 attack is the northern army, and he says in Joel chapter 2, verse 20, he's going to remove the northern army. And who's the northern army? Ezekiel chapter 39. Ezekiel chapter 39, when it talks about Son of man, verse 1, prophesy against Gog and say, verse 2, I will turn you back and leave but a sixth part of you, and I will cause you to come up from the north parts and bring you upon the mountains of Israel. So the Gog-Magog attack is from the north. Joel 2:20, I'm going to remove from you the northern army. So Ezekiel 39 is Joel chapter 2, verses 2 to 10. Okay? So what did I share with you earlier with the defeat of Gog and Magog? Ezekiel 39, verse 25. Now will I bring again the captivity of Jacob and have mercy on the whole house of Israel. The now is following Gog and Magog. All right? So now in Joel chapter 2, verse 20, after it says, I'm going to remove far from you the northern army, then the next thing it says is in verse 21, fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, For Yahweh will do great things. Be glad, you children of Zion. Rejoice in Yahweh your Elohim. He's given you, it says in the King James, the former rain moderately. Which in the Hebrew it says, the Moreh Zedekiah, the teacher of righteousness. And he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former and the latter rain the first month. The rain that's coming is the Messiah. So when's the Messiah coming? He's coming after I'm removing from you the northern army. Now the Messiah is going to come. And then it says in Joel chapter 2, verse 26, and you will eat in plenty and be satisfied and praise the name of Yahweh your Elohim, for he has dealt wondrously with you, and my people will never be ashamed. You know what the phrase, my people will never be ashamed means? You're no longer in exile, because the exile is shame. They'll never be ashamed, which means they're no longer in exile. So it's making a statement that following the removing of the northern army, that's when my people will never be ashamed, which means the exile is going to end. And then in verse 20, and you will know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am Yahweh your Elohim, and no one else. No, I am Yahweh your Elohim, and none else. So what? That's Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 35 and 39. That's what all the Torah is about. So now we're seeing here the fulfillment of all the Torah after the defeat of Gog and Magog. And my people will never be ashamed. It's repeated twice. My people will never be ashamed. No exile. Okay, verse 28. It will come to pass afterward. I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. It will come to pass afterward. After what? After the defeat of Gog and Magog. He's going to pour out his spirit upon all flesh. For what purpose? To gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. What did it say in Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 25? Now will I bring again the captivity of Jacob. What does it say in verse 29? I won't hide my face anymore. I will pour out my spirit. So exactly what it says in Ezekiel 39 is exactly what it says in Joel chapter 2 in the outline. So Joel chapter 2 is the Gog-Magog attack upon Israel. Isaiah 13 is the Gog-Magog attack upon the United States. They will happen simultaneously. Why do they happen simultaneously? Because you remember what it says in the Torah? That he makes a distinction between his people that were living in Goshen and in the rest of Egypt, so that they will know that I'm Yahweh. Well, he's going to do it again. So, logically, America will survive and Israel won't, logically. But actually, Israel's going to survive and America is going to fall, and ultimately, at the end of the Great Tribulation, won't exist anymore. Because he's going to show the nations, he's going to keep his covenant with his people, and then the exile, and that which looked like the greatest country on the earth and should survive is not, while Israel, which shouldn't, should. And he's going to do the same thing when he brought his people out of Egypt. He's going to make a distinction. Why is he going to make a distinction? So that the one that gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel will be glorified, and his name will be glorified. And that's when the world will know, as Yeshua prayed in John 17:21, that the world will be one, that they may be one, that his people's one, that the world will know that you sent me. Because when he gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel, the world will know that he sent him. Because that's when we're going to have the fulfillment of Matthew 24 that says, and the gospel will be preached in all the world, and then the end will come. What's the gospel that's being preached in all the world? The restoration of the kingdom to Israel, which is what? The gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, because gospel really means good news. And the good news is ultimately the restoring of all things, and the means by which all things will be restored is Yeshua dying on the tree. It's the means by which we get the fullness of the restoration of all things. Well, I have more to share with you, but if you like what I'm sharing and teaching, maybe you might ask me back again next time, and I can finish and I can share with you some more. You want me to keep going? Are you going? Wait! Are you going to be like those that was listening to Paul and just like falling out like past midnight? They was there for so long. All right, so you guys are really hungry. You want me to keep going, okay, right? Okay, I'll keep going a little bit. All right, so what I showed you here in this outline is that what's the sign of your coming? That Yeshua says there's going to be 6 seals that's going to precede me, and and you seeing the sign of gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, I got to go back to Matthew 24, 29 to 31. Now, the King James reads this way. The King James reads this way, Matthew 24, 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon will not give her light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Verse 29, what is that? That's the sixth seal. That's the sixth seal. So Matthew 24, 29 is now the sixth seal that we read about. So I'm going to read them both again so you can see. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give her light, the stars will fall from heaven, the powers of heaven will be shaken. So Revelation 6:12, it says that the sun became black, the moon became blood, the stars of heaven fell, and the fig tree cast their untimely figs, and the heavens departed as a scroll and was rolled together, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. Okay, now look what happens after the sixth seal. Now, you remember in Joel 2:1, the day of the Lord is at hand. It hasn't arrived yet, it's just near. Remember Isaiah 13? The day of the Lord is at hand. The day of Yahweh is at hand. Okay? But now, in Revelation chapter 6, verse 17, after the sixth seal, for the great day of his wrath has come, and who will be able to stand? So now the day of Yahweh arrives. When does it arrive? After the sixth seal. It arrives after the sixth seal, following Gog and Magog, the sixth seal. So, what do we have after the sixth seal? Revelation 7, the sealing of the 144,000. And then we're told regarding the outcome of the sealing of the 144,000. It says in Revelation chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, one of the elders answered, saying to me, who are these that are arrayed in white robes, and where'd they come from? He said, sir, you know, they came out of great tribulation. So now we're describing those that came out of great tribulation. Revelation 7 is following the six seals. So now after the six seals, Revelation 7 is going to describe the exiles of Israel. In Messiah gathering, uniting the exiles of Israel, because now we're describing who are these that came out of great tribulation, and now we're going to be given the answer. And I'm glad he's got this up here, so you can see the answer of who are these that came out of great tribulation. We're going to look at verse 16 and verse 17. So Revelation chapter 7, verse 16. They will neither hunger anymore, nor thirst anymore. The sun will not strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them, and he will lead them into living fountains of water, and Elohim will wipe away all tears from their eyes. So those two verses is describing those who came out of great tribulation. Those two verses. Okay, I'm going to highlight it again. They will neither hunger no more, nor thirst anymore. Neither shall the sun strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb that's in the midst of the throne will lead them, shepherd them. He will guide them into living fountains of water, and Elohim will wipe away all tears from their eyes. So this is describing those that came out of great tribulation. You got it? Now bring up Isaiah chapter 49, verse 10. Isaiah chapter 49, verse 10. Isaiah chapter 49, verse 10. Look, Isaiah 49:10. They will neither hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun strike them. For he that has mercy on them, which is the Lamb, he will lead them, even by springs of water shall he guide them. Do you see that those that came out of great tribulation is Isaiah 49, verse 10? Those that came out of great tribulation is Isaiah 49, verse 10. But who's Isaiah 49, verse 10 speaking about? Go back one verse to Isaiah 49, verse 9. Isaiah 49, verse 9. That you may say to the prisoners, go forth. To those who are in darkness, show yourselves. Who are the prisoners? They're the exiles of Israel. The exiles likened to a prison. and they're told to go forth to end their exile. So who's being described in Isaiah 49:10 are the exiles of Israel who are leaving their exile. And that's the ones who's coming out of great tribulation. So what do we understand the great tribulation to be? The 3.5 years before Yeshua sets his feet down the Mount of Olives, that's called the great tribulation. So when is going to be the gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel? The 3.5 years, the great tribulation. That's the period of time that he's going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. It's not going to take 40 years. It's 3.5 years. And once he does it, he sets his feet down on the Mount of Olives. So now let's go back to Matthew 24, verse 29. And I need this display up here because if you read it in the King James, it's going to give you another impression about the timing of things, okay? So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 24, verse 29. And here's how it is stated. Immediately after the tribulation shall the sun be dark and the moon will not give her light. The stars will fall from heaven. And then it says in verse 47, he will send his angels with the great sound of the trumpet, and they will gather together the elect. So based upon verse 29, it sounds like the gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is after the tribulation's over. Right? Well, let's put that in Blue Letter Bible. Matthew 24, 29. Matthew 24, 29. We'll type here verse or word. Matthew 24, 29. All right. And now we're going to click on tools. I think that's what you do. Okay, after. Wait, immediately after. Okay. It's the Greek number 3326. That's the Strong's number. It's the Greek word meta. Okay? It's the Greek word meta. Okay, I guess we can do this. Okay, stop. So if you go up a little bit more, it'll tell you how many times it occurs. 473 times. It occurs 473 times, and the most common rendering of that word, 345 times, is with. What does with mean? It means at the same time as. Okay, so why don't you click on the Strong's number there, 3326. I think you got to go back to do that. Oh yeah, you can do that. Find 3326 where you can click on it. Can you click there where it says Strong's 3326? Nope. All right, let's go back and put in the verse, or hit back arrow up there, and now click on 3326 here. Click on that right there. All right, click on that, and now it's going to give you its occurrences. And we're going to skip the first one for the sake of argument. Keep going. No, stop. It says a primary preposition. It says amid, local or causal. It says keep going. Okay, keep going. Here it is, Septuagint. That's the Hebrew. And look how it says what the Hebrew equivalent of that Greek word is. Wait a second. Okay, right there. The Hebrew equivalent of the word says SEPT, Septuagint. Thank you. So you see it says among or with. The Hebrew equivalent of the word is among or with. The way it's translated most often in the Greek is with. In the Hebrew, among or with. Okay, keep going. Okay, we're going to skip that one, Matthew 1:12. Look how it's rendered in Matthew 1:23. God with us. It's translated as with. Matthew 2:3, it's translated as with. Next occurrence. Matthew 2:11, it's translated as with. Matthew 4:21, it's translated as with. Matthew 5:25, it's translated as with. Matthew 5:41, with. Matthew 8:11, with. Matthew 9:11, with. Matthew 9:15, with. You see how I can translate it as with? So after is not really a translation. It's an interpretation. And what the word primarily means in Greek is with, and I showed you what it means in Hebrew is with. So actually, it really shouldn't say immediately after the tribulation. It should be rendered now at the same time, or along with, or coinciding with, where the sun and the moon gets darkened, which is the sixth seal. Now, verse 31, I'm going to call my messengers, and they're going to gather the elect. That's the gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. So if I compare what's being said here over to Revelation 6 and 7, over to Ezekiel Chapter 39, the gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel is after the sixth seal. So this should be rendered with Ezekiel 39, Revelation 6 and 7 as corroborating evidence that it's saying at the same time of the tribulation. What tribulation? The sixth seal. As that's going on, or actually in Israel, when Gog and Magog's defeated, verse 30. Put it in Matthew 24, verse 30. Type it in up there. Oh, there it is. Thanks. Oh, you got it. You did it the right way. So, verse 30. So, once we have the sixth seal, the sun darkened, the moon will not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven. That's Joel 2:10. That's Isaiah 13:10. Then will appear the sign. What's the sign? The cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So after the sixth seal is Messiah is going to come in the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, and you will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds. How? The cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, and in great glory. Verse 31. Verse 31. I'll read it. And he will send his angels with the great sound of the trumpet, and they will gather together the elect from the four winds, from one end of the earth to the other. And so hopefully you can see the timing of when we have the greater exodus, the gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel. So are you tired, or do you want me to show you some more? All right, just because you said so, just because you're, making me do it. All right, Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24. I love hungry people. Okay, Matthew chapter 24, verses 4 and 5 is the white horse. Verse 6, wars. And then verse 7, famine, pestilences. This is the red horse, the black horse, and I'm going to also say the pale horse. So we're going to have the first four horses of the apocalypse down to verse 7. And now look what he says in verse 8. Matthew 24, verse 8. Matthew 24, verse 8. So we have the first four horses first. Matthew 24, verse 8. All these things are the beginning of sorrows. Now, if you just read that in English, you're going to say, well, bad things are happening. It's just the beginning of bad things. If you think this is bad, it's going to actually get worse. You might read it that way. But let's look deeper and see what he means by this verse. So go back to Blue Letter Bible and put in Matthew chapter 24, verse 8. Go back to Blue Letter Bible, put Matthew 24, verse 8. All these things are the beginnings of sorrows. So we're going to click on tools, or the verse there, yeah. So let's look at sorrows. It's the Hebrew word odin. Odin, if we click on it. And what does it mean? It means the pain of childbirth, travail, pain, birth pains. All these things are the beginning of birth pains. So that's a little bit more direct than just generically things are bad. So he's saying that verses 4, 5, 6, 7, that's only the beginning of the birth pains. So he's telling us something now, that the gathering and the association, the gathering and uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is associated with birth pains. Okay? So that begs the question, if there's birth pains, that means, really it's a woman, okay? It's a woman that's giving birth. And so it's a woman that's giving birth. So now, you know what I want to know? What's the name of the woman that's giving birth? And what's the name of her child? So I want to answer that, okay? So what's the name of the woman that's giving birth? Well, the answer is Isaiah chapter 66, verses 7 and 8. So Isaiah chapter 66 and verses 7 and 8. Now look at this. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Really? Really? So you birth a child and then you go into labor? Well, this says before she went into labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a male child. So before she had any birth pains, she had a child first, and then after the child was born, then she had her birth pains. Of course, it doesn't make sense, right? Hebrew is like that. It's to catch your attention, because when it's saying something that doesn't normally make sense, it wants you to stop and say, what? Because it wants you to see what's going on here. So you know what this is referring to? Who is the she that it's talking about? Well, we'll read verse 8. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day, for a nation be born at once? As soon as Zion was in labor. Okay, now we know the name of the woman that's in labor. It's Zion. Zion was in labor. She gave birth. Okay, so it's Zion. Zion is alternatively Jerusalem. All right? And so now look up here what she's birthing ultimately in Isaiah 66, 7. She's birthing a male child. Okay, I can go into all types of scriptures, but make it easy for me, okay? Who's the male child? It's Yeshua. So what's verse 7 referring to? Verse 7 is referring to the first coming of Yeshua. He came first. He's the male child. He came first. And after he came, then there was the travail of Zion, or Jerusalem. What was the travail? The Romans came and attacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple and scattered the Jewish people to the ends of the earth. That was the travail of Zion. That was the travail of Jerusalem. When was the travail? It was after the male child was born. So the child was born first, and then you had the birth pains of Messiah coming. So that's first coming. Verse 8 is second coming. So who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day? So notice this birth is in one day. Shall a nation be born at once? As soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her children. And so who's the children that she's birthing? The end of the exile. Zion births the end of the exile. Because when you have the gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, it's called Mount Zion. Upon every assembly of Mount Zion. So Zion is Jerusalem, and that's the woman that's giving birth at Zion or Jerusalem. And so she gives birth. She gives birth as she's in labor. What's the labor? What's the intense labor? Gog and Magog. And so when it's the most intense, now from Gog and Magog, after Gog and Magog, the defeat of Gog and Magog, now we're going to have her children come forth. The gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. And when the 12 tribes of Israel are united, it's called Zion. And so now, that gives you the background. Isaiah 66, 7 and 8 is the background of Revelation chapter 12. So Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. I'm reading from the King James. It says, "There appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars." So the King James, it says wonder, and then there's a cross-reference that says sign. There appeared a great sign in heaven, a woman. So the woman, the sign is the woman that has upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So this is actually prophesying about the woman, that the woman is going to have a crown. What does crown mean? Ruling and reigning. And the woman is going to be 12 stars. What's that? That's the 12 tribes of Israel united. So this is a prophecy of the 12 tribes of Israel that's going to be united, and it's going to come forth from this woman that is in verse 2. She, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. Okay, so back to Isaiah 66. What is the name of this woman that's travailing and giving birth? The name of the woman is Zion. You got that? So, follow me now. What's going to be the name of the child that Zion is birthing? The name of the child that she's birthing is, are you ready? Zion. Zion, the woman, is birthing Zion because what she's birthing is the gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. And what's the gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel called? Zion. So Zion is birthing Zion. And from the birthing of Zion, there's something that gets birthed from the birthing of Zion. You know what gets birthed from the birthing of Zion? I've already showed you some scriptures about it today. What gets birthed from the birthing of Zion is the revelation that Yeshua is the Messiah. The revelation that Yeshua is the Messiah, and also that He's Yahweh, gets revealed when He gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel. So now let's go to Psalm 87. Now let's go to Psalm chapter 87. And verse 5. Let's see how this is rendered compared to the King James. Oh. Okay. The King James says, "Of Zion it will be said, this and that man was born in her." Of Zion it will be said, that man was born in her. What man? Yeshua the Messiah. Because we go back to Revelation chapter 12. If we go back to Revelation chapter 12, what happens when the woman gives birth? Verse 5, Revelation chapter 12, verse 5, she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations. Who's that? That's the Messiah. So the Messiah is revealed to His people. He's accepted as the Messiah by all 12 tribes. The world knows that God the Father sent Yeshua into the world. When He gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel, because the gospel is going to be preached to all the world is going to witness Yeshua gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, the cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, and bringing them back to the land of Israel. And so when that happens, then all 12 tribes will recognize and know that Yeshua is the Messiah, including the Jews. When is He going to do it? In the day of Yahweh, the day of Yeshua, the day of Mashiach, which is what? The prophetic Sabbath of creation. And to make another point here about Revelation chapter 6, that after the sixth seal, Revelation chapter 6, after we have the sixth seal, Revelation chapter 6, verse 17, Revelation chapter 6, verse 17, it says, "For the great day of His wrath is come, and He will be able to stand." The great day of His wrath. has come, and who is able to stand? Now, notice after the sixth seal is the great day of his wrath. You got that? So now let's go back to Zephaniah chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. Zephaniah chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. The great day of his wrath is after the sixth seal. Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 14 and 15. The great day of Yahweh is near. It is near. The noise of the day of Yahweh is bitter. The mighty man will cry there bitterly. That day, what? The day of Yahweh. It's a day of wrath. Revelation 6:17, the day of his wrath has come. So the day of Yahweh is a day of wrath, but in addition to it be a day of wrath, at the very end, it's a day of clouds and thick darkness. And I've already gone over for you. Clouds and thick darkness. That's the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. So he gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel at the same time as the day of his wrath. They're in parallel with one another. Okay? So now let's go back to Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. What happens once the woman gives birth to the child? It says, verse 6, and the woman fled in the wilderness where she had a place prepared of Elohim that they should feed her 1,260 days. What is that? That's the greater Exodus. Verse 6, that's the greater Exodus. So once she gives birth, what's she birthing? Zion. What's Zion? Zion is the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. So once she gives birth, now she goes in the wilderness for 1,260 days. So that's the duration of the greater Exodus, 3.5 years, 1,260 days. Notice where she goes. She goes into the wilderness. All right? So when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea, where did they go? On their way to where? The Promised Land. So you're in the wilderness on your way to the Promised Land. And how are you led in the wilderness? With a cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And it's taking you to where? It's taking you to the Promised Land. So now let's go to Ezekiel chapter 20. Ezekiel chapter 20. Ezekiel chapter 20, we're going to begin reading in verse 33. Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 33. As I live, says Yahweh Elohim, surely with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm. You see that phrase? Mighty hand and stretched out arm? What do you associate that phrase with? That's the phrase associated when he brought his people out of Egypt. So this is a redemption. With a mighty hand and with stretched out arm and with fury poured out will I rule over you. I will bring you out from the people. I will gather you out of the countries where you've been scattered with a mighty hand, with a stretched out arm, and with fury poured out. You see that it's repeated? Do you remember when Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream and he said, it's been doubled, so therefore what? This thing's been decreed. In other words, you can't change it. So it's been doubled, so you can't change it. It will be with a mighty hand and a stretched out arm, and it will be with fury poured out, both. Okay, now it goes to say, I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there will I plead with you face to face. Like I pleaded with your fathers in the wilderness, in the land of Egypt, so will I plead with you. So how did he plead with them when they went into the wilderness? How did he speak to them face to face? Through Moses, by the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And so, as I did, I will do again. I'm going to speak to you face to face. And I'm going to cause you to pass under the rod. What does passing under the rod mean? It means I'm going to correct you. I'm going to cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. And I will purge out from among you rebels. Who's the rebels? The ones that won't follow the Torah. So he's been giving us this time to learn the Torah, to be taught the Torah, to have the Torah in our heart, so we know what the Torah says, so that when we get out in the wilderness, when he's leading us back, and he's telling us to follow the Torah, so we won't rebel. Okay? So we have who are these that came out of great tribulation? The answer was Isaiah 49, verse 10. The woman gives birth, she flees in the wilderness 1,260 days, 3.5 years. So that 3.5 years is the time of the greater Exodus. Now, 3.5 years is also 42 months. So now we go to Revelation chapter 13. And verse 1, we have the beast rising up out of the sea. And in verse 5, Revelation 13, verse 5, what are we told about the beast? How long is the rule of the beast? It was given power for him to continue for 42 months. So the beast's rule is 42 months. And how long is the woman fleeing in the wilderness? For 42 months. They are parallel. So let me tell you what I think the beast ruling for 42 months is. We're going to, at some point here, have an economic collapse, a worldwide economic collapse. And you know what the powers to be going to be? They're going to execute their great reset. And it's in the papers right now of what they want to do. They want to establish one world government. They want to rebuild the Tower of Babel. So they are going to get their one world government. And you know how long they get to enjoy it? For 3.5 years. All this time and all this effort to have their one world government, and they're going to get it for 3.5 years, and when 3.5 years are over, they won't have it anymore. So we have one world government. What's also happening at the time of this 3.5 year period? No one may buy or sell. All right? But now, let's look at Revelation chapter 15, verses 2 and 3. Let's look at Revelation chapter 15, verses 2 and 3. Revelation chapter 15, verses 2 and 3. I saw those that got the victory over the beast, over his image, over his mark, and over the number of his name. When do we have the beast, his image, his mark, and the number of his name? During that 42 months. I saw those that got the victory over the beast, his mark, his image, and the number of his name. And they're playing harps. They're having harps. And in addition to having harps, they're singing the song of Moses, and they're singing the song of the Lamb. So notice, this is a people that's getting the victory over the beast, his mark, and his image, and the number of his name. Well, you can't get the victory over the beast, his mark, and his image, and the number of his name if the beast and his mark and the image and the number of his name doesn't exist. There's nothing to overcome and get the victory over. If it isn't there, that's opposing them. So it's at the same time. So at the same time, we have the beast ruling for 42 months. At the same time, we have the mark of the beast. It's the same time that another group of people are getting the victory over it. And when they get the victory over it, they're singing the song of Moses, and they're singing the song of the Lamb. Do you know what the song of the Lamb is? It's Messiah gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. Because the gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is likened to a song, right? You have a marriage and the marriage celebration. It's likened to a song, and who's going to do this? Who's going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel? The Messiah, who's the Lamb. So it's his work, it's his task, so it's his song. It's the song of the Lamb. And when he leads you and gathers you back to the land of Israel, you're going to be singing that song with him. And poetically, how are you going to be singing the song? With a harp. Now let's go to Revelation chapter 14, verse 1. I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000. Where's the lamb? On Mount Zion. Who's also there? 144,000. And what is on Mount Zion? the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion, upon all her assemblies, a cloud and smoke by day and the shining of a flaming fire by night. They're standing on Mount Zion. So what does that mean? That means they're participating in the gathering, uniting in the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so what are they doing in verse 2? Revelation 14, verse 2. I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. So the ones on Mount Zion, which the Lamb is there, they're playing their harps, and the one that's playing their harps in Revelation 15 are getting the victory over the victory of the beast and his mark and his image and the number of his name. And now notice what they're doing. They're singing a new song. And notice at the end of verse 3, they're redeemed. They're singing a new song. They're singing a new song, and they're redeemed. They're singing a new song, and they're redeemed. So let me show you this. Let's go to Psalm 98. Psalm 98. Psalm 98, verse 1. Sing unto the Lord a new song. What are they doing in Revelation 14? They're singing a new song. Sing unto the Lord a new song. Sing unto Yahweh a new song. For he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm has gotten him the victory. He's made known his salvation, his righteousness. He's revealed, look, in the sight of the nations have seen it now. He's remembered his mercy and his faithfulness to the house of Israel. What's that? The promises made to the forefathers. They're going to be scattered and they're going to be regathered. And all the ends of the earth have seen it because he's gathering, uniting his people from all the nations of the world and gathering by the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So when he's gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, it's a new song. So now let's go to Psalm 137. Let's go to Psalm 137. Verse 1. Oh, wait a second. How can we forget this? Thank you so much. Psalm 98. You only had verses 1 through 3 up there. I thought, well, something's missing here. Now look, sing unto Yahweh a new song. Verse 5, sing to Yahweh with a harp, with trumpets. All right? So now, Psalm 137, verse 1. Psalm 137, verse 1. By the rivers of Babylon we sat down. We wept when we remembered Zion. So notice, in Babylon, you sit. In Babylon, you weep. In Babylon, you can only think and dream of Zion. Okay? Now notice what you do in Babylon. We hang our harps upon the willows. Now in Babylon, you can't play your harp because it's up on the willow tree. But the people on Mount Zion, they're playing their harps. So Babylon is exile. Playing the harps is the end of the exile. For those that carried us away captive required of us a song. What song are they saying? Sing us a song of Zion. They sing the song of the Lamb. So sing a song of Zion, and what's the answer? How shall we sing Yahweh's song in a foreign land? That's exile. You cannot sing the song of Zion. You could not sing Yahweh's song in exile. You could only sing the song of Zion, and you could only sing Yahweh's song, which in Revelation 15, verse 3 is called the Song of the Lamb. You could only do that when you come to Zion, when you have the end of the exile. So what's Revelation 15, 2 and 3? It's describing those that are on the greater exodus, that get the victory, because what's happening with those that are not on the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, the beast is ruling and reigning. Now look at this in Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13 and Revelation chapter 13, verse 7. Revelation 13, verse 7. It was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. So there's a group of people that the beast is making war with and overcoming them. Who are they? Who are these people? Revelation chapter 13, verse 9. He that has an ear, let him hear. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Okay, you know who he's overcoming? Those who are taking up their guns, and they're going to fight him. They're going to fight him. And they're going to take their guns, and they're going to get a bunch of people together, and they're going to say, this isn't going to happen to America. We're going to take up our guns, and we're going to fight. That's who he defeats. You know who defeats him? Those that sing the Song of Moses and the Song of the Lamb. That's who defeats him. Who are they? They are those that are being led by the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So when all this chaos comes to America, the first 4 seals, the 5th seal, the 6th seal, once you see that 6th seal, are you supposed to stay and fight for America and for the Constitution so that we have a country for our children and our grandchildren? No. You're supposed to go into the wilderness and he's going to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so now I told you it's going to happen during the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation, right? When is the starting point of the greater Exodus? Well, when did the children of Israel, when was their Exodus? They had Passover, and once they had Passover, they left. Right? So the 10 plagues preceded it, right? So they had Passover, and once they had Passover, they left Egypt. When did the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night show up for the children of Israel? During the days of unleavened bread. Right when they faced the Red Sea. So that's the pattern. That's why you study the Torah, so you learn that. Because that's going to happen again. So after you have the defeat of Gog and Magog in the land of Israel, the exile he's declared over, and what I believe it's going to be is the next Passover following the defeat of Gog and Magog in the land of Israel. That's the Passover that begins the greater Exodus. That's also the Passover that begins the Great Tribulation. And so you're going to have your Passover Seder. And after you have your Passover Seder, you're going to go into the wilderness. Where's that? I think for the people I'm talking to here, where's that? It's called the Ozark Mountains. You're already here, okay? You're supposed to go where you're at. And this is the wilderness of the people. This is the gathering spot. And so you're here. You're here already where you're supposed to go and where you're supposed to be. And during the days of unleavened bread, if it's the exact pattern, it's 3 days after, or 3 days into the days of unleavened bread, the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is going to show up. And the only thing that the children of Israel knew is they journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot. And so what's Sukkot? That's where you live in tents. And so you're going to be in the wilderness. You're already here. And you're going to gather your supplies. You're going to gather your tents. And you're going to wait for the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night to show up. And you're going to have leadership. You know what the name of the leadership is? The 144,000. You know how you got to know who they are? Because after the 6th seal, they get sealed. So you'll know who the leaders are. So follow the cloud. Follow your leadership, which means you must understand community. And so that's what it is. It's the Passover of the time of the greater Exodus. And at the same time we're starting the greater Exodus, it's the same time that they're formally operating one world government. And so hopefully from all of this, I've given you a long but biblical explanation as to why is Yahweh drawing people into the Ozarks, into this area. And I don't know any other place in America. I'm hearing there's a big gathering in East Tennessee that everyone's going to. But besides that, and besides this, I don't know of any other places where there's people that's going into a community, Torah believers. And so, thank you. So, why? Why have you been drawn here? Why have you come here? To join with other believers, to learn community, to learn how to get along with each other, to learn how to love one another. Does it mean you're going to agree on every single thing? No, but you still get along. You still be nice to one another. And you start preparing as a community, and you watch for these signs. And when you see these signs happen, then you are going to be fully prepared to participate and grow in the greater exodus. Because you know what I think? I don't even think we've started to even begin to see the number of people that's going to be coming to the Ozarks and coming to this area. We've just seen the first wave, if you can call the first wave of the last 20 years, okay? And so this is why you're here. And this is the purpose of why you're here. And so hopefully, as we try to live out Torah daily, we can at the same time be focused on what the end goal and objective and why he is here. And we can get prepared and be prepared for Yeshua's return, and we can be the wise virgins and not the foolish virgins. Amen? Amen. All right, well, that's going to conclude what I have to share tonight. So now I got logistical things for all those diehards that stayed for so long. There's several ways in which you can bless the ministry. One, I don't know where it might be, but there's somewhere around here a donation box. So that helps supports me to share this message with others and be in full-time ministry. And so if any writes out a check, you can make out your check to Hebraic Heritage Ministries. Hebraic Heritage Ministries. We are not going to formally pass the box. Someone's going to tell us where the box is, and the Lord speaks to you. You can put whatever in the box, okay, as you're leaving or whatever. Second way to bless the ministry is I got a whole slew of product material on different subjects back there, so you can peruse and see what you might be interested regarding that. And then thirdly, if you want systematic, structured teaching, perhaps, hopefully, like you heard tonight, on a variety of subjects related to understanding our Torah walk, I have a discipleship website. And it's, since you got the website, the browser up there, you can put it up there for them. You put HebRootsDiscipleship.com. So why don't you type that up there? HebRootsDiscipleship.com. All right? So, here's the website. And there's a place here to sign up to become a discipleship member. And so if you just want to take all the courses online digitally, it has software that tracks your progress and keeps track of everything that you do. It's $25 a month if you do it digitally. If you want me to send you a monthly DVD of my choice, that's $35, okay? So a lot of people think that they're signing up for a discipleship program and you know, getting something out of the discipleship program, and you are, but really, for me, the discipleship program, the $25 a month helps to support the ministry, okay? So how I would probably prefer that you think about this if you decide to go for it is you're supporting the ministry for $25 a month, and as a thank you for supporting the ministry for $25 a month, you have access to all the teachings, and you can take all the teachings at your pace, all right? And then fourthly, so take off the word discipleship and put Hebroots social network. So just erase the word discipleship and replace it with social network. So in November, December, I created this Hebraic Roots social network, and it's just supposed to be for Torah believers, okay? So what you do here is you go here, you create an account, you sign up, you put in your email password, you got to get sent an email. A lot of times it sends you into your junk box, so find it and then confirm that you want to be in. Then it will allow you to get into the site, and it's basically emulates Facebook. and Facebook functions, but Facebook still's got Big Brother watching and seeing everything that we do. And this is so that we, in the Torah community, that we can interact with one another, stay connected with one another, and build a community there. So David back here, earlier today, he created a group for the people in this area. He created it to help people that are coming into the area, to help them, but it can also be used for the people here in the area to connect, to talk, to communicate with one another. And if other leaderships, congregations or one other want to make a group, I can talk with them and we can make another functional group. And so this is another way to a tool that you can connect and interact with one another. So I would encourage you to sign up for David's group so you guys can begin the process to connect with one another. And I'm sure you have existing communication now, so I'm not asking you to get rid of your existing communication. It's just this is another thing that we can develop. All right, so I believe by me being here the last few days, I came in Thursday, I think the Lord has given me greater understanding as to why He asked me to sell my house in Ohio and wanted me to come to Missouri, because I really think He wanted me to get connected and network with people who are here in the Ozarks. And, you know, when I bought my house, I didn't know the degree that all of you guys exist here. Now I'm told there's people all throughout Missouri and into northern Arkansas. And so we'll just see how Yahweh leads, how He directs, and how we can help one another in the process going forward until Yeshua comes. So I pray and hope that you've been blessed, and that we can stay connected and continue to work and help one another going forward until Yeshua returns. Amen. If you've been blessed, give Yeshua all praise, glory, and honor, because He deserves it. And I praise and thank Him for who He is on behalf of His Heavenly Father.